Okay, let's just jump right in. The world is swimming in more debt than it ever has before. And behind this massive surge, there's an incredible story about a new kind of global banker. In this explainer, we're going to go inside one of the biggest and most secretive lending sprees in modern history. Just take a second and look at this number. $346 trillion. According to the Institute of International Finance, that is the new world record for global debt. I mean, it's a number so vast it almost doesn't feel real, right? But trust me, its impact is very, very real. And here's the thing that's truly mind-boggling: the speed. You can see right here, in just a single year, global debt shot up by over $18 trillion. That's just an insane pace, and it's mostly being driven by governments borrowing to keep the lights on. This giant, ever-growing mountain of debt, well, that's the stage for the entire story we're about to unpack.
Okay, so we've got the scale of the problem, a world basically drowning in debt. But that brings up a really important question, doesn't it?
Exactly. Who's on the other side of this deal? I mean, who is funding this massive explosion of borrowing, especially for the developing countries that need the cash the most? Well, the answer to that question has completely changed over the last couple of decades. And that's where the main character in our story comes in. We're talking about China and its incredible transformation into the world's biggest, and you could argue most powerful, government lender. And this chart? Wow, it just lays out how unbelievably fast that all happened. See that bar on the left? By 2016, China was lending more money to the developing world than the World Bank and the entire Paris Club combined. Let that sink in. The Paris Club is, a whole group of major creditor nations. So yeah, China became, hands down, the biggest official lender out there. And listen to this quote from the key research paper this is all based on. It really hits the nail on the head. For China's lending to rival the World Bank. I mean, the World Bank is a foundational piece of the global financial system we've had for decades. This wasn't just some small adjustment. This was a massive tectonic shift in how the world works.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth did this happen so fast? Well, think about it like this. China's insane economic growth created these huge piles of foreign cash, right? Reserves. And instead of just parking that money in something safe like U.S. Treasury bonds, its state-owned banks started lending it out. It's actually a really interesting echo of what happened with petrodollars back in the 70s, when oil-rich countries did the same thing with their profits and kicked off another huge debt boom.
Okay, so the scale was massive, but it wasn't just about the size. This was a totally different kind of lending. It came with, let's call them Chinese characteristics that basically rewrote the rulebook. It's a great question, right? Are all international loans basically the same? And the answer is absolutely not. Not even close. The fine print, the terms and conditions, can be just as important as the loan amount itself. And this is where China's strategy gets really, really interesting. All right, let's break down these terms because this is super important. First off, the interest rates. These aren't the cheap, friendly loans you might get from a development agency. Nope, they're mostly commercial rates. Second, collateral. About half of these loans demanded it. And often that collateral was a country's future earnings from things like oil exports. Pretty clever. Third, you've got these no Paris Club clauses. This basically means borrowers can't lump this debt in with their other loans if they need to restructure. It puts China first in line to get paid back. And last but not least, secrecy. Intense confidentiality clauses that meant countries couldn't even admit the loan existed. It's no wonder the researchers called it muscular and commercially savvy.
And all that secrecy? Well, it leads straight to this huge problem called hidden debt. Get this, at the peak of the boom, it's estimated that half of China's lending to these countries was never reported in the official stats. That creates massive blind spots for everyone else. I mean, how is the IMF or some credit rating agency supposed to do its job and figure out a country's financial health if they can't even see the full picture of its debts? Every big party has to end sometime. And a boom built on debt, it always has a turning point. For China's lending spree, that moment is here, and it's called the Great Reversal.
This chart right here, this is really the climax of the whole story. It's showing us what's called net financial transfers. New loans going out minus loan payments coming back in. Look before 2019. The money is flowing from China to borrowing countries. Things are good. But then, look what happens. The whole thing flips on its head. Now, way more money is flowing back to China in repayments than is going out in new loans. The party is over. The boom has officially reversed. And just like that, the whole dynamic changes. China went from being the world's go-to banker to its biggest debt collector.
As risks went up around the world, the easy money dried up, and China's banks switched gears. Their new priority wasn't handing out loans, it was getting paid back on the old ones.
So what happens when a country just can't pay up? Well, this is where you see a huge clash. On one side, you have China's typical playbook. They'll extend the loan, maybe give you a grace period, but they almost never just write off the debt. They treat it like a temporary cash flow problem. But on the other side is what these countries actually need. They're not just short on cash, many are fundamentally insolvent. They need real deep debt relief. Lower interest rates, maybe even writing off some of the principal. Just kicking the can down the road isn't a real solution.
Okay, so let's pull back for a second. This whole boom and bust cycle, it's not just a bunch of numbers on a chart. It has completely changed the global financial system. It's really created a new world order for finance.
So what does that actually mean for the future? Well, a few big things. First, the system is way more fragmented now. You've got these competing groups of creditors, China over here and the traditional Western institutions over there. Second, it's a much murkier world. All that hidden debt makes it a lot harder to deal with a crisis when one hits. And third, the whole architecture is more multipolar. The old days of the IMF and World Bank completely running the show, those are being seriously challenged.
Which brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. For all those countries that got new airports, new roads, new power plants, but are now drowning in debt to China, was it all worth it?
And honestly, the only real answer comes from the researchers themselves. And it's this: the jury is still out. The infrastructure they built is very real. You can see it and touch it. But the crushing debt payments, they're just as real. So for dozens of countries, the next few years are going to be this incredibly tough balancing act. Will this whole chapter be remembered as a launchpad for growth or as the beginning of a lost decade? We just don't know yet. The final verdict is a long way from being written.